The sky over Los Angeles was a dull, hazy gray, a sharp contrast to the bright, sunny postcards usually associated with the city. It was one of those afternoons that felt heavy and humid, the kind of weather that makes everything feel a little bit slower. On a quiet side street tucked away from the noisy main roads, Keanu Reeves was walking alone. He wasn't dressed like a movie star. There were no designer suits, no bodyguards, and no flashy cars following him. He was wearing a simple, faded jacket, a pair of old jeans, and scuffed boots. He had his hands shoved deep into his pockets and his head slightly lowered, just enjoying the feeling of being anonymous. For a man who is recognized everywhere in the world, these moments of walking alone were rare and precious. He wasn't heading anywhere specific. Sometimes he just liked to walk to clear his mind. He passed by small shops and apartment buildings, blending in perfectly with the other pedestrians. Most people walked right past him, looking at their phones or rushing to get somewhere. They didn't notice that the man walking near them was the same guy they watched in movies. Keanu liked that. He liked being just another face in the crowd. But as he turned a corner near a small alleyway, something stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't a sound at first, but a feeling. He had walked past this spot before, but today his eyes caught something that didn't look right. Parked against the curb was an old sedan. The paint was peeling off the hood and one of the hubcaps was missing. But it wasn't the age of the car that made Keanu pause. It was how full the car was. Every inch of the interior, from the front dashboard to the back window, was stuffed with belongings. There were piles of clothes, blankets, a stack of old magazines, and even some boxes of food. It was a mess of chaos, but an organized kind of chaos. This wasn't just a car full of trash. It was someone's life packed into a tiny space. Keanu slowed his pace, his eyes studying the vehicle carefully. He knew that in a city like Los Angeles, many people struggled to find a place to live. He had seen it before. But seeing it up close, just a few feet away from him, always hit a nerve. He started to walk past it, minding his own business, trying to respect the privacy of whoever lived there. But then a noise cut through the quiet air. It was a cry. It was the sound of a baby, and it sounded upset and uncomfortable. Keanu stopped walking completely. He turned his head back toward the car. The cry was coming from inside the vehicle. It wasn't a loud, screaming wail, but a persistent, unhappy fussing that tugged at the heart. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking around to see if anyone else was noticing. People were walking by on the other side of the street, lost in their own worlds, completely ignoring the sad sound coming from the battered car. Keanu hesitated. He knew that approaching a stranger's car could be seen as rude or scary. He didn't want to be the famous guy intruding on someone's private life. But the thought of a baby sitting in a hot, stuffy car surrounded by piles of clothes made him feel uneasy. He couldn't just walk away and enjoy his day knowing that a child might be in distress. He took a deep breath, shifting his weight from one foot to the other before making a decision. He stepped off the curb and walked toward the sedan. As he got closer, he could see inside the car more clearly. In the driver's seat, a woman was sitting. She looked incredibly tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her shoulders were slumped forward. She had her head resting in her hands, her elbows propped up on the steering wheel. She didn't look like she was sleeping, but rather like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders and was trying to find the strength to lift it up. Behind her, in the back seat, strapped into a car seat, was a small baby. The baby was red in the face, squirming and crying. Clearly unhappy with the situation, Keanu walked up to the driver's side window slowly. He didn't want to startle her. He kept a respectful distance, not looming over the car, but crouching down slightly so he wouldn't look threatening. He raised his hand and gave a gentle tap on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of his knuckles on the glass made the woman jump. She snapped her head up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. For a second, she looked defensive, ready to protect her space and her child. Then her eyes focused on the face outside the window. The shock was instant. She blinked a few times, her brain trying to process who was standing there. She saw the familiar beard, the sad eyes, and the kind expression. It was Keanu Reeves. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He saw the panic in her eyes and immediately raised one hand in a friendly wave, using the other to pull down his face mask slightly so she could see him smile. He wanted her to know he wasn't a threat or a police officer. He wanted her to see he was just a person. The woman reached for the window crank. It was an old car, so the window made a grinding noise as she rolled it down. The air inside the car smelled stale, like old clothes and unwashed bodies. It was a heavy, sad smell that made the reality of her situation even clearer. "I am so sorry," the woman said immediately, her voice shaking. She started frantically trying to tidy up the front seat, pushing piles of clothes aside as if that would hide the fact that she was living in her car. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to park here. I'm leaving. I'll go right now." She was embarrassed. She didn't want a celebrity, or anyone for that matter, to see her like this. She felt ashamed of her situation, and her instinct was to run away. But Keanu shook his head gently. He didn't look at the mess. He didn't look at the piles of stuff. He looked right into her eyes. "Please don't apologize," Keanu said. His voice was soft and low, very calm. He had a way of speaking that made people feel safe. "I just heard the little one crying and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. You guys doing all right?" The woman stopped tidying. She looked back at her baby, who was still fussing in the back seat, and then she looked back at Keanu. She looked so exhausted that it seemed like she hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks. We're okay," she lied, but her voice cracked, giving her away. She looked down at her hands, which were rough and dry. "He's just teething. And it's hot today. He's cranky. We're fine." Keanu looked past her into the back seat. The baby was sweating. There was no shade in the car. The windows were cracked just an inch, but the air inside must have been stifling. He looked back at the woman. He could see the dark circles under her eyes. He could see the way her hands trembled slightly. He knew they weren't just fine. No one lives in a car with a baby and is fine. But he also knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just barge in and take over. He had to treat her with respect. "It's really tough when they are teething," Keanu said, keeping the conversation going, trying to build a bridge of trust. He leaned his arm against the car door, getting comfortable. "I remember when my sister was little. It was hard on everyone." The woman seemed surprised that he was still there. She expected him to nod, say, "Good luck," and walk away. That is what most people did. They looked, they felt bad, and then they kept walking because dealing with it was too hard. But Keanu was standing there, leaning against her dirty car door, talking to her like she was a neighbor. "He usually sleeps better," she said, her voice getting a little softer as she relaxed, just a fraction. "But we lost our spot at the shelter this morning. We had to move the car. I think the movement woke him up, and now he won't go back down." Keanu nodded slowly. He didn't say, "Oh, that's terrible," in a pitiful way. He just nodded, accepting her reality. He could see the desperation behind her eyes. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for a handout. She was just trying to survive the day. But looking at the situation, Keanu knew that just surviving wasn't enough. The heat was rising, the baby was upset, and the mother was at her breaking point. "Is there anything I can do?" Keanu asked. It wasn't a polite question. It was a genuine offer. "Maybe I can get him some water? Or something for you." The woman looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. She saw the kindness in his face. She realized that the person standing outside her car wasn't the actor from the movies. He was just a human being who saw another human being who needed help. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of him. "I don't want to be a bother," she whispered. "You're not a bother," Keanu replied firmly. "I'm just walking. I have nowhere to be. Just tell me what you need." It was at that moment that the dynamic changed. It wasn't the famous star and the homeless woman. It was just two people standing on a street corner in LA. The baby let out a loud cry again, and the woman sighed, the sound heavy with defeat. She looked at Keanu, and for a second, the wall she had built around herself crumbled. "He's hungry," she admitted quietly. And I haven't eaten in 2 days. I was trying to save the last bit of formula for tonight. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the silence of someone truly listening. Keanu looked at the baby, then back at the piles of belongings in the car. He saw the struggle, the fear, and the love this mother had for her child despite having nothing. He didn't say a word for a few seconds. He just processed the information. Then he stood up straight, checked his pockets, and looked down the street toward a market he had passed earlier. The woman sat alone in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. 10 minutes. He had said 10 minutes. But in her world, time moved differently when you were waiting for something that felt too good to be true. The baby was still crying in the back, a low, fussy sound that grated on her nerves, not because she didn't love him, but because she was so tired and had so little left to give. She watched the rearview mirror, her eyes darting to the spot where Keanu had disappeared. Every car that drove past made her heart jump a little, hoping it was him, but they were just strangers going about their normal lives. They had homes to go to, beds to sleep in, and pantries full of food. She had a car full of clothes and a hungry baby Dot. As the minutes ticked by, the doubt started to creep in. It was a cold, familiar feeling. Why would he come back? He was a movie star. He probably just felt awkward in the moment and said he would get help to escape the situation. It was the kind of thing people did. They promised to help or said, "I'll pray for you," and then they vanished, leaving you feeling even more alone than before. She felt a sting of tears in her eyes, angry at herself for believing him. She should have just told him she was fine. She shouldn't have admitted she was hungry. Now she felt exposed. She reached back and wiggled the baby's seat, trying to soothe him. It's okay," she whispered, her voice cracking. The heat in the car was getting worse. The sun was starting to break through the clouds, turning the vehicle into an oven. She felt trapped. Just as she was about to roll up the window and give up on waiting, a familiar figure walked quickly around the corner. It was him. He wasn't walking slowly anymore. He was moving with purpose, his jacket flapping behind him. He was carrying 2 large brown paper bags, one in each arm. They looked heavy. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking around to see if anyone was watching him. He was looking right at her car. A wave of relief washed over her so strong it made her head spin. He actually came back. Keanu reached the car and set the bags down on the sidewalk. He was breathing a little harder, his chest rising and falling from the fast walk. He wiped a bit of sweat from his forehead and gave her a small nod. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't make a big deal out of it. He just bent down and tapped on the window again. She rolled the window down immediately. The smell of fresh bread and something sweet drifted in from the bags, overpowering the stale smell of the car. It was the best thing she had smelled in months. "Sorry that took a few extra minutes," Keanu said, his voice warm and friendly. "The line at the store was longer than I thought? I hope you're hungry." Without waiting for an answer, he started to pull things out of the bags. He didn't just dump them in her lap. He handed them to her one by one, like he was presenting gifts. First, he pulled out a large can of premium baby formula, then a pack of newborn diapers. Next, he handed her a bottle of cold water for herself, followed by a container of fresh fruit and some sandwiches wrapped in plastic. "I wasn't sure exactly what he eats, so I got the sensitive stuff," Keanu said, gesturing toward the formula can. "And for you, I got a few things that will keep for a bit. Turkey sandwiches, some apples, and oh, I also grabbed a few things for the heat." He reached deep into the bag and pulled out a battery-operated fan, the kind you can clip onto a stroller or a car seat. "It's not air conditioning, but it moves the air around," he said. "I thought it might help the little guy cool off." The woman stared at the items piling up on her lap. She was holding the water bottle, but she was afraid to open it, afraid this was all a hallucination. You didn't have to do all this," she stammered. "This is too much. I can't pay you back." Keanu smiled, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He shook his head. You don't have to pay me back. I saw you guys and I wanted to help. That's all. There is enough food here to last you a couple of days at least? He paused and looked at the baby, who was still whimpering. The baby had stopped crying loudly, perhaps sensing the shift in energy in the car, but he was still upset. Keanu looked at the mother. Do you mind if I mix a bottle for him? He asked gently. Maybe if he eats, he'll feel better and you can get a break. The woman was stunned. A stranger, a famous movie star, was asking permission to feed her baby because she was too tired to move. She nodded slowly. Not trusting her voice to speak, Keanu reached in and took the bottle she had on the seat. It was dirty and half empty. He took it from her hand without flinching. I'll rinse this out real quick, he said. He walked to a nearby water fountain on the corner of the street. He spent a good 2 minutes scrubbing the bottle with soap from his own pocket pack, making sure it was perfectly clean. Passers-by were staring now, recognizing him, pulling out their phones to record. But Keanu didn't care. He was focused on the bottle. He wanted it to be safe. He came back and carefully mixed the formula with the distilled water he had bought. He tested the temperature of the milk on the inside of his wrist, just like a seasoned parent would. Then he opened the back door of the car and leaned in. The baby watched him with big, wet eyes. Keanu didn't just shove the bottle in. He talked to the baby in a soft, silly voice. Hey there, little man, he could. I heard you were hungry. I got you some good stuff. Yeah, look at that. He gently placed the bottle near the baby's mouth. The baby latched on immediately, sucking hungrily. The car went quiet. All that could be heard was the sound of the baby swallowing and the distant traffic. Keanu stayed there, leaning halfway into the back seat, holding the bottle steady with one hand and gently stroking the baby's cheek with the other. He looked completely at peace. There was no rush. He wasn't checking his watch. He was just helping a baby eat. The woman turned around in her seat to watch. It was the strangest, most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Here she was, in the darkest moment of her life, sitting in a beat-up car on a dirty street, and Keanu Reeves was in the back seat feeding her son with the tenderness of a father. It broke down the wall she had built around her heart. She felt seen. She felt like she mattered. After the baby finished the bottle, Keanu burped him carefully, holding the baby against his shoulder for a moment. The baby let out a small burp and then closed his eyes, his belly finally full. Keanu gently strapped him back into the seat and clipped the small fan nearby so a stream of air blew on the baby's face. The baby looked comfortable for the first time all day. Keanu stepped back out of the car and closed the door softly. He dusted off his hands and looked at the woman through the open driver's window. She was crying now, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. He's out, Keanu said quietly. He'll probably sleep for a while now. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. I was ready to give up today. I really was. Keanu leaned his arms on the door sill again, getting down to her eye level. His expression turned serious. Don't give up, he said, his voice intense but kind. I know things are hard right now. I can see that. But you are doing a good job. You are taking care of him. That's the most important thing in the world. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the thick white envelope he had brought with him from the store. He held it out to her. She looked at it, hesitating. Please, he said, pushing it gently toward her. It's not charity. It's just, luck. Sometimes luck changes. Let today be the day your luck changes. She took the envelope. It felt heavy. She didn't open it, but she knew by the feel that it was a lot of money. It was enough to get them off the street, at least for a while. It was a lifeline. I'm going to go now, Keanu said, standing up straight. He didn't want to make a scene. He didn't want her to feel like she had to entertain him. You take care of yourself and the little guy. And make sure you eat one of those sandwiches, okay? You need your strength. He tapped the roof of the car lightly, a goodbye gesture. He turned around and started walking away. He didn't look back. He didn't wait for applause or thanks. He just put his hands back in his pockets and headed down the street, disappearing back into the city. The woman sat there for a long time. She looked at the bags of food on the seat next to her. She looked at the baby, sleeping soundly in the back with the cool breeze from the fan hitting his face. She looked at the white envelope in her hand. The gray sky didn't look so heavy anymore. The air didn't smell so stale. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small flicker of hope burning in her chest. She wasn't just a homeless woman anymore. She was a mother who had been helped by a stranger who acted like an angel. And that was enough to keep her going for one more day. The woman sat in the driver's seat for a long time, the silence in the car feeling heavy but peaceful. The baby was finally asleep, his breathing soft and rhythmic, a sound she hadn't heard in days. The little fan Keanu had clipped to the seat was whirring quietly, pushing a cool breeze over the baby's flushed face. She looked down at the white envelope in her hands. It was thick, much thicker than she expected it to be. With shaking fingers, she lifted the flap and peeked inside, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a few dollar bills thrown together out of pity. It was a stack of large bills. She didn't count it right there on the street, afraid that someone might see. But she could tell just by looking that it was enough to change everything. It was enough for a deposit on an apartment. It was enough for food for weeks. It was enough to buy a car seat that wasn't broken and clothes that actually fit. She pressed the envelope to her chest, closing her eyes, and let out a sob that she had been holding in for months. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that someone saw her. Someone didn't look away. Someone treated her like a human being. She knew she couldn't stay parked on that street anymore. It wasn't safe, and she had a mission now. She needed to get her baby to a safe, clean place. She carefully started the engine, praying it would turn over. The car sputtered and coughed but finally roared to life. She pulled away from the curb. Leaving the spot where she had felt so trapped just an hour ago, she drove slowly, looking for a place to stay. She didn't want a fancy hotel, just something clean and safe. She found a modest motel a few miles away. It had a vacancy sign flickering in the window. When she walked into the office, clutching the envelope, she felt different. Usually she walked with her head down, trying to make herself invisible, waiting for people to judge her for her dirty clothes or her tired face. But today she stood up straight. She paid for a week in cash. The clerk looked surprised but didn't ask questions. When she opened the door to the motel room, the smell of lemon cleaning detergent hit her. It smelled like safety. There were 2 clean beds with white sheets. There was a bathroom with a shower that actually worked. She carried the sleeping baby inside and laid him gently on the bed. He stretched out, enjoying the soft mattress, and didn't wake up. She stood there for a moment, just watching him, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders that she didn't know was possible. She turned on the TV just to have some noise in the background, then sat on the edge of the bed and finally counted the money. It was more than she needed. It was a lifeline that had been thrown to her by a man who had no reason to care. Meanwhile, back on the street corner where it all happened, a small group of people had gathered. They were confused, stunned, and talking loudly among themselves. When Keanu had walked away, he didn't leave quietly. He left behind a trail of shocked witnesses. A teenager wearing a hoodie was standing by the wall, looking down at his phone. He had been filming a video for his friends when Keanu walked into the frame. At first, he thought it was a prank or a look-alike. But now, replaying the video, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Dude, look at this," he said to a friend standing next to him. He'd bought all that stuff. And he washed the bottle. He actually washed the bottle. His friend shook his head, eyes wide. "I thought for sure he was just going to give her an autograph and leave. You know, like take a picture and move on. But he stayed. He was there for like 20 minutes. Across the street, an older woman who had been waiting for the bus had seen the whole thing. She had a shopping bag full of groceries and tears in her eyes. She hadn't approached the car or Keanu, but she had watched every second of it. She turned to the man next to her. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in this city," she said softly. "We walk past people like that every single day. We judge them. We ignore them. He just helped. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't call a news crew. He just helped." The man nodded, looking down the street where Keanu had vanished. "That's why people like him," he said. "He doesn't act like he's better than anyone else. Most celebrities, they act like they are from a different planet. He acts like a regular guy who just happens to be famous." He treated her with respect. "That's rare." The teenager with the phone looked up. "I'm posting this," he said. "Not because I want to go viral, but because people need to see this. The world is so crazy right now. Everyone is fighting. We need to see something good." He uploaded the clip. It wasn't a professional video. It was shaky, the audio was a bit muffled by the wind, and you couldn't hear everything, Keanu said. But you didn't need to hear the words. You could see it in his body language. You could see the way he leaned into the car, the way he smiled at the baby, the way he wasn't rushing. You could see the mother's face change from fear and shame to relief. The caption was simple: "Just saw Keanu Reeves change a stranger's life on 5th Street. No cameras, no fuss, just kindness." The internet reacted instantly. The video started getting shared and reshared. Comments poured in by the thousands. People were saying things like, "This is why he is our internet husband," or "He is the nicest guy in Hollywood." But there were also deeper comments. People wrote about their own struggles with homelessness. Others talked about how they had received help from a stranger when they were at their lowest. The story wasn't just about a celebrity giving money. It was about the power of noticing people. It struck a nerve because so many people feel invisible in a big city. Back in the motel room, the woman decided to take a shower. It was a luxury she hadn't had in a long time. As the hot water washed over her, she scrubbed away the days of grime and stress. She cried again, but this time they were tears of cleansing. When she got out, she put on one of the clean t-shirts Keanu had bought. It was a size too big, but it was soft and smelled like fresh fabric. She looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't see a homeless person anymore. She saw a mother. She saw a survivor. She sat back down near the bed and checked her phone. She usually didn't have much data, but she turned on her Wi-Fi to check if there were any job openings nearby. That was when she saw it. Her picture was on the screen. It was a video posted by someone nearby. She watched it, her hands trembling. She saw herself looking tired and defeated sitting in the car. Then she saw him. She watched him walk to the store, come back and feed her baby. She read the comments. Hundreds of strangers were sending her love. "Stay strong, Mama. You got this. Praying for you and your little one." She felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the motel heater. The world felt a little less lonely. For so long, she had felt like the city was trying to swallow her whole, like she didn't matter to anyone. Now, millions of people were watching her story, and instead of judging her, they were rooting for her. She thought about Keanu. She wondered where he was right now. Was he back on a movie set? Was he eating dinner at a fancy restaurant? Or was he just walking home alone? She realized she didn't know where he lived or what he was doing tonight, but she knew one thing for sure: he was a good man. She whispered a thank you to the empty room, hoping that somehow the universe would pass the message along to him. The baby stirred, waking up for a moment. He looked up at her and smiled, a big, gummy smile. He wasn't crying anymore. He wasn't hungry. He was safe. She picked him up and held him close, rocking him gently. "We're going to be okay," she whispered into his soft hair. "We're going to be okay." The day had started with despair, a gray sky, and a crying baby. It had been the kind of day that breaks people. But because of one man's decision to stop, to look, and to care, the day had ended with a warm bed, a full belly, and a renewed sense of hope. The crowd on the street corner had dispersed, going back to their own lives, but they carried the story with them. They would tell their friends at dinner. They would post about it online. They would remember that kindness isn't just about writing a check. It's about getting your hands dirty, it's about washing a bottle, and it's about treating a stranger with dignity. And as the city lights flickered on outside the motel window, the woman finally closed her eyes, feeling not just exhausted, but grateful. The days that followed that incredible afternoon were a blur of activity and change for the young mother. It wasn't like a magic wand had been waved to make all her problems disappear instantly, but the heavy stone that had been crushing her chest had been lifted. The money Keanu gave her was enough to buy her the one thing she had been missing the most. Time. Time to breathe, time to think, and time to figure out a plan without the panic of starvation hanging over her head. She spent the first few days in the motel getting her strength back. She ate the food he had bought, and she slept when the baby slept. It felt strange to sleep in a real bed, in a room that locked from the inside, where she didn't have to keep one eye open for danger. But she knew she couldn't stay in a motel forever. She needed a home, with clean clothes she had washed in the bathtub and her hair brushed neatly. She started looking for an apartment. It was still scary. Walking into rental offices with a history of homelessness and no steady job was terrifying. Most places turned her away before she even sat down. But this time was different. When the rejection came, or when the landlord looked at her with suspicion, she didn't crumble. She thought about the man on the street corner. She remembered how he looked at her, not with judgment, but with kindness. That memory gave her a tiny bit of steel in her spine. Finally, she found a small basement apartment in a quieter part of the city. It wasn't fancy. The windows were small and the carpet was old, but it had a kitchenette and a lock on the door. When she handed over the cash for the deposit, her hands shook, but the keys she received in exchange felt like gold. That night, she sat on the floor of her empty living room with the baby crawling around on a soft blanket. It was theirs. No one could ask them to move. No one could honk their horn and tell them to drive away. They were safe. Once she had a roof over her head, the next step was work. She didn't want to live off the money Keanu gave her forever. She wanted to save it for emergencies. She found a job at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous. She worked long hours on her feet, bussing tables and washing dishes. Her back hurt at the end of the day, and her hands smelled like soap and fry grease. But when she looked at her paycheck, she felt proud. She was doing it. She was building a life, brick by brick. A few months passed. The seasons began to change. The baby was growing bigger, stronger, and happier. He was always smiling now. He had learned to walk, holding on to the edges of the furniture in their small apartment. The mother was different too. The dark circles under her eyes faded away. She smiled more. She was no longer the scared, exhausted woman living in a car. She was a survivor. One rainy evening, she was walking home from the diner with a bag of groceries in her arms. The wind was cold, cutting right through her jacket. She turned a corner and saw a young man sitting on the sidewalk, huddled under a soaking wet blanket. He had a small cardboard sign that asked for help. He looked freezing and people were rushing past him, avoiding eye contact, just like they used to do with her. The woman stopped. She looked at the man and saw herself. She saw the fear in his eyes and the shame in the way he hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself small. Her heart went out to him. She didn't have much money left from her paycheck that week, just a few dollars. But she had a warm coat and she had a hot meal sitting in her bag. She walked over to him. At first, he flinched, expecting her to yell or tell him to move. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the sandwich she had bought for her dinner. It was wrapped tightly in plastic. She handed it to him along with a $5 bill she had in her pocket. "Here," she said softly. "It's not much, but it's warm." The young man looked up, stunned. He took the sandwich and the money, his eyes widening. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice chattering from the cold. "God bless you." The woman smiled at him. "Don't give up," she said. The words sounded familiar. They were the same words Keanu had said to her. "Things can get better. Just hang in there." She walked the rest of the way home in the rain, but she didn't feel cold. She felt warm inside. She realized that the gift Keanu had given her wasn't just the money or the food. It was the reminder that she was human and that she had the power to help others too. By helping that man, she felt like she was finally passing on the goodness that had been shown to her. Meanwhile, the video of Keanu's act of kindness continued to live on the internet, but in a different way. The news cycle moved on as it always does. There were new scandals, new movies, and new trends to talk about. But for the people who had seen the video that day, it stayed with them. It became one of those stories that people tell their friends when the world feels too dark. It became a symbol of hope. As for Keanu, he never spoke about it publicly. He didn't go on talk shows to brag about how he saved a family. He didn't post a photo on social media with the caption #blessed. He just went back to his life. A few weeks later, he was spotted at a coffee shop, buying a coffee for the person in line behind him. He was seen picking up trash in a park near his house. He was seen helping an elderly woman carry her groceries up a flight of stairs. For him, it wasn't about being a hero. It was just about how you treat people. He believed that everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle, and sometimes you have to be the one to stop and help them fight it. One afternoon, the mother was pushing the baby in a stroller through a busy park. The sun was shining and the baby was laughing at the birds. She saw a group of tourists taking pictures of something, or rather someone across the grass. She squinted and saw a familiar figure walking a dog. It was Keanu. He looked relaxed, wearing his usual simple clothes. For a second, she thought about running over to him. She wanted to thank him again. She wanted to show him that his money hadn't been wasted. She wanted to let him know that because of him, her son had a home. She wanted to tell the world that he was even better than people thought. But then she stopped. She watched him from a distance. He was just a man, walking his dog, enjoying his day. He didn't need a crowd. He didn't need a speech. She realized that thanking him wasn't the point. The point was that she was okay now. She had a life. She had dignity. As she had the chance to be kind to someone else, she turned the stroller around and walked the other way. She whispered a quiet thank you into the wind, knowing that somehow he would understand. She pushed the stroller toward the playground, the baby gurgling happily behind her. She had a future now, and that was the best thank you note she could ever write. The story of the baby living in the car, and the movie star who stopped to help didn't change the entire world. There were still homeless people in the city. There were still struggling mothers. The world didn't magically become perfect. But for that one family, the world had changed completely. And for the thousands of people who watched the video, it reminded them of a simple truth. We don't have to be rich to be kind. We don't have to be famous to make a difference. We just have to notice the people around us. We have to see the baby in the car. We have to see the mother with her head in her hands. And instead of walking past, we have to stop. We have to ask, "Are you okay?" That afternoon on the side street wasn't just about a celebrity handing out cash. It was a lesson in humanity. It showed that a single act of kindness, no matter how small, can create a ripple effect that travels far and wide. It can turn a life of despair into a life of hope. And sometimes it can leave people speechless. Not because of the shock of the moment, but because of the pure, simple goodness of it all. As the sun set over the city, the woman put her baby to bed in his own room. He slept soundly, surrounded by soft toys and clean blankets. She sat in a rocking chair nearby, watching him sleep. She thought about the dark day in the car, and she thought about the kind stranger with the sad eyes. She smiled, closing her own eyes, feeling at peace. The nightmare was over. The real life story had a happy ending. And that was a miracle in itself.